Great, thank you. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce Maddie Smith and Jessica Zimmerly from Earth Ministry. Earth Ministry transforms faith into action for the well-being of communities and the environment. They organize people of faith to advocate for strong environmental policies and provide strategic guidance to religious communities working toward environmental justice. Their Greening Congregations program was the first in the country to help houses of worship implement sustainable practices, and their Faithful Advocacy program is on the cutting edge of empowering clergy and lay leaders to speak out on public policy issues. As a multi-faith organization, Earth Ministry is part of the National Interfaith Power and Light Network, active in nearly 40 states around the country. And I will let you two take it over now. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to be here. I'm Maddie Smith. I'm on staff at Earth Ministry along with my colleague Jessica, who's here today. And I'm really excited to be talking to fellow UUs today. I'm a Unitarian Universalist and member at University Unitarian Church in Seattle, along with doing this multi-faith organizing work with Earth Ministry. Yeah, and I think I am really committed to this work because I'm a UU, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think UUs are already well positioned for multi-faith organizing and that sort of work, and are doing a lot in terms of justice work. And like I really see being a UU as a call to do that work. And I think all of us here too probably do as well. And yeah, I'm calling in today from Maple Valley, which is the traditional lands of Coast Salish peoples, including the Duwamish and Muckleshoot. And I will pass it to my colleague Jessica to share a bit about herself.
Thanks, Maddie. Good morning. It is good to virtually gather and warm up our bodies together. Thank you for that grounding to start us off, Sahar and Larkin. My name is Jessica Zimmerly. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Program and Outreach Director at Earth Ministry in Washington Interfaith Power and Light. It is good to see familiar faces and also to meet new folks here. I am calling in from the Greenwood neighborhood of Seattle, lands of the Duwamish people, and also where Earth Ministry's office is located on Duwamish lands. Personally, I am a practicing Lutheran and am in seminary on the journey towards ordination as a deaconess in the Lutheran tradition. It's a roster of word and service, and my call within that is to faith-based organizing for environmental justice. So this is very much where I feel the Spirit bringing me into this very particular intersection, and we are excited to share some of our passion with you about that work today. Larkin did a really excellent job with a Earth Ministry overview. I just want to get a sense of if we're familiar to folks in the room. So maybe you could do a thumbs up if you know of us well, thumbs down like, yeah, maybe I heard of you, or sideways, excuse me, like maybe you've heard of us, thumbs down if this is your first encounter with us. Awesome. I love seeing thumbs down. Great. Okay. So I will just elaborate a little bit on who we are so you can have a sense of the organization we are representing. But then we're going to spend the bulk of our time today digging into various environmental justice campaigns that are current and timely. And we have a good number of actions for you to participate in throughout our time together. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on our overview because we want to get to those action pieces. But the basic tale is that Earth Ministry has been around for nearly 30 years. We grew out of a group from the Episcopal Cathedral in Seattle who went to clean up oiled shorebirds off the coast of Grays Harbor after the Nestucca oil spill. And they had a very emotional experience. And they sat on the beach at the end of the day and they said, we came here together through our church, but why haven't we heard about this in our life together as spiritual community? So they took up that mantle, and we were one of the first faith-based environmental organizations in the country. And here we are, decades later, still doing that work. It has grown and expanded. So we launched an interfaith project about 12 years ago that connected us to the National Interfaith Power and Light program. As mentioned, we're in the introduction, it is about 40 states strong. And so Earth Ministry is the Washington affiliate of that National Interfaith Power and Light Network, which connects us with others across the country. That's how we originally met Maddie, because they were working at the DC affiliate of IPL. So it's a wonderful community to be a part of. And then just in the last year, we took our next step into becoming a fully multi-faith organization. So we are very much excited and enthusiastic about this, and also mindful and intentional about how we are growing into a more fully authentic multi-faith identity. That looks like more intentional outreach and relationship building in communities beyond the Christian tradition. Though, like I said, we have been connected very much in the Unitarian world and in the Jewish world specifically, and now working to even expand further. We're also really intentional about our board representation. So we began there and have welcomed our first Jewish and Unitarian board members to our team here at Earth Ministry. So that's all laid out in our strategic plan that was launched last year. You can check it out on our website if you want to see more about who we are and what our vision is. How that manifests in the world is that we work with houses of worship and faithful advocates as individuals to really put their faith into action. We're very much wanting to live out our spiritual traditions and our call to environmental stewardship therein. So we have a greening congregations program that is a flexible certification process for houses of worship to really discern and live out that call to care for Earth. And then we also have our Faithful Advocacy program. So all of the campaigns that we are going to talk to you about today are organized in partnership with secular coalitions. We really believe in the value of collaboration. So we work with within the broader environmental justice movement here in our state, and then we're really thoughtful of where can the faith community voice really amplify our efforts, and where can we bring in our values and our spiritual grounding into the conversation in a way that can move us from the head more into the heart space. That is the gift that we bring as people of faith into these spaces that can get really wonky and policy or science tech based. We want to bring it back into kind of the human level of our stories and our values and our faith. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Maddie, who will share a little bit of UU grounding in this work.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Yeah, I think when I first learned about Unitarian Universalism and the 7 principles, I was really drawn to the 7th principle about this interdependent web that we're all a part of. And I think that tends to be the grounding for a lot of UU environmental work or environmental justice advocacy. But I think increasingly I've noticed that UU work is also UU environmental justice work, especially at the national level with UU Ministry for Earth. And I see Allie's on here, and I hope you're doing okay given everything going on in Texas. Is also increasingly being informed by the eighth principle, which I know hasn't, which is about racial justice and recognizing that our 7 principles don't, in practice, in our UU communities, don't always lead to racial equity. And I think increasingly in the UU communities and UU spaces, environmental justice work is not only being informed by our 7th principle, but also by this emerging 8th principle that many UU organizations have adopted, and some congregations have adopted as well, but hasn't been adopted at a national level. And if folks haven't heard about the 8th principle, I'd really encourage you to check it out. There's a great website. Let me see if I can find it and put it in the chat.
No worries, Maddie, we'll do that.
Okay, great. Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And so, oh, great. I didn't realize Justice Washington has adopted the 8th principle. That's awesome. I know we're having conversations about it at my church, University Unitarian Church. And I know folks at my church are really excited to talk to folks at Quimper who also have an 8th principle task force. And I think, you know, the more that we can center racial justice in environmental justice work as UUs, the more meaningful that work is, and the more that that work is being informed by actually listening to impacted communities. And so I just wanted to throw a little plug in there for the 8th principle and how that really informs my work in environmental justice as a UU. You know, the 7th principle is great, but there's a reason why folks have expressed a need for this 8th principle as well. Yeah, I think I'll stop there and turn it back over to Jess.
Thank you, Maddie. I really appreciate bringing the 8th principle into the conversation. And I will share, so I mentioned that we work in secular organizing spaces. I want to pull from that, that really intentionally following the lead of those most impacted by the climate crisis is incredibly important in this work. And doing so in a way that embodies humility and a willingness to step back and listen and come alongside and even just stay behind is so important. So a lot of what we bring to you today is work that we are doing that follows the lead of tribal nations, our sovereign First Peoples of this region, whose treaty rights, unfortunately, are disregarded time and time again. And that is really a moral issue at the core. So when we're talking about these campaigns we're going to bring up, really, first and foremost, they're issues of treaty right violations, of violating the supreme law of our land, and also our moral obligation to respect the First Peoples who are here long before us, since time immemorial. And also as a part of the faith community, I'll speak from myself, coming from the Christian tradition, we have added responsibility for reconciliation of past wrongs towards Indigenous peoples. So there's an added depth to this work of allyship for me as a Christian that I want to acknowledge. Much of our work follows in addition to our Indigenous allyship work, follows impacted communities in Black community and other communities of color, low-income folks, those who are really experiencing the weight of the climate crisis now. Deserve to have the first place at the table for the conversation about how to remediate the problem. So we're going to begin here with some of our current legislative advocacy work. And then just to give you a sense where we're going, Maddie will then touch on our work supporting the Puyallup tribe in stopping a fracked gas plant in Tacoma. And then we will touch on some work in the southeast part of our state, supporting the Nimiipuu Nez Perce tribe and their efforts for salmon recovery. So those are the three campaigns we're going to cover, and let us dive in because it's a lot. And remember, again, I think Gary put in the chat, it's a long way from the head to the heart sometimes. So we're gonna give you the basics to maybe get your mind at peace. But what I encourage you to do as we talk through these different issues is to notice where it stirs your heart and what kind of flickers might come forward of, oh, that doesn't sit well with my value of stewardship or justice or equity or responsibility. And to carry that into how we continue to show up. So let me get my screen share going here. Actually, before I do, Earth Ministry works in the state legislature each year. And it is a joy to help bring people of faith into the legislative process. I know that quite a few of you have followed along there. Each year we pick a slate of legislative priorities that we support. This year we have two top bills that we are all in on and really excited about bringing the faith community together around. We do have a list of supplemental bills that Earth Ministry is supportive of. These are ones that we are endorsing and signing in as we can. But given our limited capacity and this remote setup, most of our active energy is going to these top two priorities that we've discerned to be really important. And the first is around environmental justice and equity. So let me get my screen share up here. And I'll share the first bill and then we'll come back for questions and then move to the second. So you have a sense of where we're going. Okay, so I am so excited that we are supporting the HEAL Act. It is Senate Bill 5141. And what this bill will do is define environmental justice in state law, and as a result, require its application across agencies. So we're looking at 7 different state-based agencies, like the Department of Ecology and Health and Agriculture, etc. And those agencies will have some new responsibility to really work directly with impacted communities to eliminate health disparities that are tied to environmental pollution. Part of what the bill does is fund ongoing updates for Washington State's environmental health disparities map. Perhaps Maddie could drop that in the chat. It's a really amazing resource that shows the variations in health risks and how they are tied to pollution. So we want to see a future in which the disparities across our state are minimized and we have more shared good health. The other piece of this that's really important is that it will create an environmental justice council. And this is really a group with real responsibility, not just a figurehead, but one that will help oversee the implementation of this law, will hold the agencies accountable for how they integrate it, which is supposed to be done by 2024. And will have input and be really engaging with communities as well. So if you're advocating for the HEAL Act, pulling out this Environmental Justice Council as central to it is really important. It's kind of the piece that legislators are hooing and hawing about. And we see that as a racial justice issue, right? Because there are many other governor-appointed councils that have various responsibilities in our state agencies and across. And this is giving real power to people of color and those on the margins. And we're seeing pushback from that with legislators, which is an issue. So this piece is really important for us to speak up for. I will add one piece that's come alongside the Justice Council is that there will be an interagency work group. So there'll be a rep from each of these 7 agencies, and they will be in conversation with the EJ Council. They are not voting members though. So they're a work group alongside to have really good, clear communication. A bit about why this is important. We believe as people of faith that where you live, your income, race, language ability should not determine how healthy and safe you are. And unfortunately, that is not the case currently as shown by this health disparity map. So we are working towards a future that rights that. And this bill is really an excellent pathway to systemic justice that does center those most impacted. Also in how it was created, it centered impacted communities as it grew out of the Environmental Justice Task Force. So they did community listening sessions for 2 years, came forward with a report that was released in the fall and a slate of recommendations. And one of those recommendations was to pass the HEAL Act. The bill is moving along, which is good news. It has passed the Senate Environment Committee and is now in the Ways and Means Committee. It was heard yesterday and has been scheduled for an executive session on February 19th. That's tomorrow. Oh my gosh, time flies. So what we have for you now is an opportunity to send a note to your senator if they sit on Ways and Means. And I think I might actually stop share here and come back. Oh, there you are. So before we do that action, I want to ask if there are questions about the HEAL Act. Sounds awesome, right? I think in my 8 years of this organizing, it's the bill that we worked on that most clearly aligns with spiritual values, which is great. Chris, yeah, hi.
Hey, how much money does this set aside for this project to be enacted?
Yes, so it does have a fiscal note, and I do not know what the actual bill is. The last coalition call I was on, the note hadn't dropped yet. And now it has since it's in Ways and Means, but I haven't had a chance to dig in. So it will have a budget line. We know that our state's budget is something that we have to be very intentional about. I think our role as people of faith here is to say, this is worth our money. This is something that so clearly aligns with our values that we need to invest in it and do that in a way that has real outcomes, right? So again, it's not just a figurehead like, oh yeah, we'll just write this into the law and then it'll be on the books and we'll forget about it, but has ongoing accountability. I do know this is the second substitute of the bill. And so in the negotiations so far, budget has been part of that conversation. And so it has been scaled down to be a bit more realistic in both the cost and also the ability for agencies to actually implement it. So originally it was supposed to be every state agency. Now it's been narrowed down to these 7. That's just one example of kind of honing in on it. Any other questions? Let me check if there's anything in the chat. Okay.
Jessica,
Yes.
I have a question. Does Earth Ministry have recommended language or letter to send to our legislators?
Yes. So, Maddie, you want to walk us through that right now?
Yeah, so we have a handy dandy form. I just put a link to it in the chat. And the great thing about the Ways and Means Committee is that there's a lot of senators on it. So there's a good chance that your state senator is on this form. If you're not sure if your senator is on this committee or not, our form, you just plug in your address and it will tell you. And if your senator is on the Ways and Means Committee, then you can personalize a message to your senator to say, hey, like this bill is really important and the faith community and you are keeping an eye on it and want to see it passed. And that it's really timely because like Jessica said, it's in executive session tomorrow. So the way our form works is you just plug in your address and your faith community, and then you can click next and it will tell you whether your senator is one of the targets or not. And if it is a target, meaning that your senator is on the Senate Ways and Means Committee, then you can personalize the message and send it to your senator. So I'd really encourage everyone to take a second and do that right now if you can. We're also, it hasn't passed the Ways and Means Committee yet, but we're hopeful that this bill will eventually end up on the Senate floor. We don't know that for sure right now, but then all the senators will be needing to hear about this bill then by that point. Yeah, Deb.
So why does it have to be our particular senator? Why can't we just send letters to any of them?
You could definitely. The way our form works is it only sends constituent letters to elected officials. But if you wanted to copy the language from the form once you enter your address, you could potentially email that to any senators on the committee that you wanted to, or any senators you feel like really need a little nudge on this.
Well, Chris had his hand up earlier and Dave's got his hand up too.
Yeah, Dave.
I just wanted to respond to Deb. I used to answer mail for a U.S. senator. They are very, very sensitive about any communication from people in their district or their state. If my senator from Pennsylvania got a letter from Ohio, he would virtually throw it in the trash. That's unfortunate, but that's the way things work in the world of real politics.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Michael. You're muted, Michael.
Muted. Okay, so I'm not quite awake. I just filled out the form and I hit the button and it just went away. What does that mean?
Did it take you to the part where you can fill out the message?
Not really.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll dig into that. I imagine that probably means that your senator isn't one of the targets.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll look into that after and make sure it's all working how it's supposed to.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a good reminder. So like Maddie said, eventually this will go to the Senate floor. Here's hoping. And if you want to stay engaged with any of this work that Earth Ministry is doing, we do have a sign-in sheet that you can drop your contact info in, and we will stay in touch and send geographically relevant and timely action. So Maddie, maybe you can drop that in the chat. And if opening that form is too much right now, you can also just drop your name and email into our chat here. Okay, Michael, yeah.
Okay. I think if a bill goes to the Ways and Means, that it means that there's a fiscal impact.
Yes.
So basically it's been passed by the committee, and then they figure out the cost of it, and then it goes to the floor?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. Sometimes it will also go to a rules committee, which will just make sure it's legal. But committee being committee referrals, that's the word, kind of look different in each setting. Which is a good segue into our second bill, which I'm just going to touch on briefly since our action today is focused on HEAL, and our topic is environmental justice. We wanted to give that the most airtime, but I do want to share briefly our second legislative priority, which is very much focused on climate action. It is a clean fuel standard. The one that is moving is House Bill 1091. And what a clean fuel standard does is require fuel producers to clean up their product. And it also has some encouragement to invest in low carbon alternatives. So this broken down is a 20% reduction in the carbon intensity of fuels by 2035. That means 15 years from now, what comes out of your gasoline powered car's tailpipe will be 20% cleaner than it is today, meaning it will have 20% less greenhouse gas particles that contribute to climate change. This is mostly accomplished by blending in of biofuels. We know biofuels can be problematic on their own, so there is a accountability measure woven in with the policy that includes a life cycle emission analysis. So that means looking at the creation of these biofuels and their whole production through being burned. It's a really awesome, I think, I don't know, instigator for a more holistic system in how we get around. So we're talking about using existing excess. We're not talking about like planting monocrop corn and turning that into ethanol. Instead, we're looking at using excess from the agriculture industry, from forest industry, from even our landfills to create new fuel that burns cleaner. It also has a bit of a marketplace mechanism that will incentivize the transition to clean fuels. So if producers don't meet their intensity reduction, they have to pay in, and they're essentially giving money directly to their competitors in the clean fuel industry. And some of that pay in is also going to be reinvested in impacted communities. This is important because our transportation sector is our largest polluting body in our state. It causes nearly half of our climate pollution. And of course, as we're seeing exacerbated in the COVID-19 pandemic, air pollution is directly tied to human health and well-being. So cleaner air will be healthier communities. And then finally, Washington is the last on the West Coast to not have a clean fuel standard. California, Oregon, and British Columbia all have a clean fuel standard in place, and it is going swimmingly. We are actually sending a lot of the fuels that we make here in Washington into these other states because they are clean and, well, cleaner. And in the meantime, all of the dirtiest fuels are funneled into Washington because we are the only place they can be sold. So we want to get on board and have seen it work well elsewhere. It has passed both the House Environment and Appropriations Committee. We thought it was going to go to the floor, but then got a curveball and it was referred to the Transportation Committee. It was heard there this week, has not yet been scheduled for a vote, but we should see that soon, and then it will be on to the floor, and Earth Ministry will likely be doing sending around some action opportunities to contact your representatives in support once it makes it to that floor vote. Okay, any quick questions about the clean fuel standard? Okay. Well, I'm a bit over my time then. So if you do have questions that arise around clean fuels, feel free to send me a note. I'm going to put my email in the chat as well. And then I will now turn it over to Maddie, who will talk through some of our work around Tacoma LNG. And I think it's important, you know, in this season in winter, we often get really excited about legislative advocacy because 'tis the season and we only get to do this for part of our year. But we really see our work as faithful advocates as year round, and something that takes many different forms in how we show up. So that's why today we wanted to spend some time outside of this realm of legislative advocacy, which is where many of us are kind of in that headspace to step back and see what else is happening across our state. So with that, I will turn it over to Maddie.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I also wanted to just share that, you know, these are Earth Ministry's top 2 priorities, but there's many good bills and things that we would love to see implemented in Washington in the legislature right now, including the great thing is that Justice Washington and Earth Ministry have a lot of overlapping legislative priorities this year, which is really awesome. So you can learn more about some other bills that are exciting on our website. You know, we're a small staff and not able to do all of the things we would love to do. Jessica and I are 2/3 of Earth Ministry's staff. So you get a real treat here today. But there's obviously lots more going on in the legislature, but we just don't have time to talk about it today.
So you couldn't drag Leanne in, huh?
She's actually off this week. Yeah. So you get 100% of the working staff this week. Okay, before I share my screen, I'm curious how many folks are familiar with Tacoma LNG, like how many folks have heard. I know we have a lot of folks concentrated in the Puget Sound region, it sounds like, on this call today. Yeah, I'm sure folks have heard a little bit about it. It's pretty terrible. And I'm gonna share my screen and share a little bit more about what's going on. If I get my tabs in order here. Okay, so we can skip this slide. This is just the slide I usually have for these sort of presentations. So this bottom picture here on this slide is what Tacoma LNG actually looks like. It's this pretty massive, ugly tank. And this project is being built by Puget Sound Energy, which is probably for a lot of folks on this call is probably at least your gas utility, if not also your electric utility. Out here where I'm located in Maple Valley, our utility is Puget Sound Energy for gas and electricity. And that's not true for everyone that's on this call probably. But Puget Sound Energy is the state's largest for-profit utility, and they are trying to build a large fracked gas facility on the Puyallup tribe's ancestral land, or ancestral waters, as I'll say. And I will explain a little bit more about that in a second. And basically, what they want to do is lock the region into relying on fossil fuels for decades more. And we all know we're at a point in dealing with the climate crisis where we can't afford to be building new fossil fuel infrastructure. And we especially can't afford to be building new fossil fuel infrastructure on indigenous land. Oops, I accidentally clicked my slide. So PSC wants to fill this tank with liquefied fracked gas. So they'll pressurize it so it will be liquefied. And they want to use that liquefied natural gas to fuel cargo ships going up to Alaska. They're also asking right now, ratepayers, which are many of us on this call, I presume, are paying for 40% of this project, but will only ever see about 2% of the gas, because most of this gas they're trying to sell and make money off of by fueling cargo ships. They also claim that this facility is needed as a peak shaving facility, so that when the few times a year when it gets really, really cold and people that use gas to heat their homes need it, that then this facility will ensure that we don't have any shortages of gas. But that also assumes that we're going to keep heating all of our heating buildings with gas. And there's a lot of advocacy in this area moving away from heating buildings with gas. And I think, there's a great bill in the legislature right now that is trying to move us away from gas. And I know Bellingham has done some advocacy on not building new buildings with gas hookups. And so this really is trying to lock us, this project is really trying to lock us into the status quo. And that's without even any of the issues of violating the Puyallup tribe's treaty rights, which is the main issue here that I really want to talk about. And why, there's so many things wrong with this project that I could talk about it all day and say all of the things that are wrong with it. But the main thing that's wrong with it is that the Puyallup tribe is against it, and it's being built on their land without their permission. And then this picture at the top is a picture from a rally in Tacoma of folks advocating against this project and standing with the Puyallup in this issue. So this is one thing I want to stress in regards to treaty rights, is that the Puyallup tribe are one of the tribes that signed the Medicine Creek Treaty. I believe Nisqually and Squaxin Island were the other tribes that signed that treaty. I might be wrong on that. And so I really love this picture, and because it really illustrates what's going on here. And this is actually a screenshot from a film called Ancestral Waters that really does a great job of documenting this issue, and I'll share a little bit more about that film later. But basically, this green line that you can see is the boundaries of where the treaty boundaries themselves, that includes multiple tribes and multiple reservations for those tribes. This orange line is the Puyallup tribe's reservation. You can see here is Commencement Bay in Tacoma, here's downtown Tacoma, and then this is the Port of Tacoma on the Tacoma Tide Flats here. And so here is where the LNG plant is being built in this little red rectangle. This orange highlighted part shows oops, I just knocked my mic over. So when this treaty was signed, this orange part that's highlighted was water. It was water, it was estuary, it was mudflats. And over the years, the port and industry have been built on this water that wasn't ever land to begin with. They've put fill dirt there and have built on it. So the only reason that the place where Tacoma LNG is being built, the only reason it's not part of the Puyallup tribe's reservation is because it was water when the treaty was signed back in 1854. And so it's not technically on the reservation, but it's still within the treaty rights boundaries, and the treaty rights that the Puyallup have from this treaty say that they have the right to hunt and fish in their accustomed areas, all within these treaty boundaries. So Puget Sound Energy likes to say, it's not on the reservation, it's not on the reservation. We're like following all the rules and things, but like if you look at this picture, it's really clear that this is basically on the Puyallup tribe's land. It's on their ancestral waters, and they're really concerned that this project is going to impact their treaty rights and impact salmon in Puget Sound and other critters in Puget Sound in a time when we're already, when we already know that there's a lot of, populations are struggling. So people are probably curious about what's happening right now with this project. So the unfortunate thing is that the project has received all of the necessary permits it needs to be built. And so Puget Sound Energy is building it. That doesn't mean it's over. And I want to stress that it's absolutely not over. And there are still lots of things we can do to say, this is not a done deal. This is not over. Right now, so the last permit the project received that they needed was a clean air permit from the Puget Sound Air Agency. And this permit issuance was pretty controversial, I think, because a lot of folks argue that they didn't really look at the full life cycle analysis of greenhouse gases. And that means looking at where the gas is fracked up in BC and Alberta and the Dakotas in our country, and looking at, there's a lot of methane that's released then. So they didn't look at the full life cycle analysis of the greenhouse gases that associated with this project. And so what's happening right now is there's a legal appeal the Puyallup tribe is doing, along with some partner environmental organizations that are all working on this appeal together. And the exciting thing is that they're appealing this one clean air permit. And the exciting thing is that these hearings are coming up very soon. They start April 12th. And we've been waiting a while for these hearings to begin, as the last permit was issued in December 2019. And the appeal was filed right after that. The really exciting thing is that recently, Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson submitted an amicus brief to the Washington State Pollution Control Hearings Board, which is the legal body court that's will hear this case. And so the legal power of the state is behind the Puyallup tribe's case, which is good in this case, I think. From what I've heard is that state courts don't often want to go against the state attorney general, and that can be problematic for several reasons, but this is good in this case. So those hearings start April 12th, coming up pretty soon. I also just wanted to share a bit about why we care about this in faith communities. I always like to say that the Puyallup tribe has specifically asked for the faith community's support in this issue, and Earth Ministry has been involved in this campaign for several years, back when there was a proposed methanol plant in Tacoma, if folks remember that. That was before my time at Earth Ministry, but I'm sure Jessica could tell you many stories about all the terrible things that people have wanted to build on the Tacoma tide flats on the Puyallup tribe's land. There's lots. And then, sort of as Jessica talked about earlier, treaty rights and fossil fuels are moral issues that clearly violate UU principles, and that's why we should be, siding with the tribe and following their lead on this and doing whatever we can to make sure this fracked gas plant isn't built on their land. These pictures here on this slide are actually folks from my church, University Unitarian Church. That last February, we had a climate crisis event at UUC, and that was probably the last big thing that happened at church before we began to gather virtually because of COVID. And so one thing we're doing right now, that Earth Ministry is doing right now, is to help. So there's not a lot that we can do right now to influence the court case. The lawyers are the ones working on that. But our job right now is to make sure that this issue stays being talked about in the court of public opinion and that people know about it, because it only helps Puget Sound Energy if people aren't talking about it or don't know about it. And so one thing we're doing right now, Earth Ministry is doing, is collecting these photo petitions, we call it. And these photos are examples of what that looks like. And so what we're doing is asking folks that care about this issue in faith communities to take a picture of yourself holding this sign, and I can put a link to that in the chat. And then we post this on social media and we tag Puget Sound Energy so they know that people are paying attention to what they're doing, no matter how much money they spend on trying to convince people that this project is green when it's not. Okay. So yeah, what can we do? I sort of talked a little bit about this. Participate in this photo petition campaign we have. I've managed to get a lot of UUs at my own church to participate in this, simply because they know me, but I would really love to see more UUs participate in this publicly. And I know lots of folks at Quimper have shared about this too, because we were able to do a screening of a film there a couple months ago. And so I'll put more instructions about that in the chat after I'm done, and share about how you can do this photo petition campaign. One last thing I want to say is that I would really encourage folks to go to Native Daily Network's website. They're a Native-led media organization, nonprofit 501c3, that has done a lot of really important documentation and work documenting the Puyallup tribe's fight against Tacoma LNG. And so their website, maybe Jessica can throw that in the chat real quick. They have a lot of stories online about the Puyallup tribe's fight against Tacoma LNG. And they're a Native-led organization that we really want to support and lift up, and help more people learn about their important work. What a part of their work is this documentary, full-length documentary film they made called Ancestral Waters. And maybe Jessica can drop it's on their website. And it's a full-length film that's out online for free, because they really want people to learn about this issue and to be informed about what's going on.
So do we want to mention briefly that that's something that Allie from UUMFE and us and Earth Ministry
we're
talking about doing a campaign with the film.
Yeah,
We haven't decided on a date yet, though, I don't think.
Yeah, we're that's in the works. Hopefully,
Yeah.
We'll see. But folks right now can totally go watch this online. It's available free online, and we really want folks to watch it and share content from Native Daily Network's website if you can. Yeah, I know I talked about a lot of things. I can put the links in the chat for those things. And then how can you stay involved? Well, keep in touch. Please fill out I can also put the link to the sign up form. Right now, because it's an illegal appeal, the one call to action we have for folks is the photo petition, but that may change depending on the outcome of the appeal. And we're hoping that if the appeal goes our way, there will be opportunities for public comment, and more opportunities for folks to get engaged. And we hope that that can happen, and we can't mobilize folks if we don't know who they are. So we really encourage you to stay in touch with Earth Ministry on this, and we'll of course be staying in touch with Deb and everyone at Justice Washington to keep this in the public mindset. We'd also, if you're able to, we'd encourage folks to donate to Native Daily Network to help support their work on this issue. And if you can't donate, maybe share some content from their website. They have a lot of really good content that people should know about.
So this is going to an administrative court, right? It's not going into a
Yeah,
regular
this
judicial
this
court.
yeah, this
So,
is being heard in the Washington Pollution Control Hearings Board.
okay, so can
And
amicus brief, well, so if Ferguson is filing an amicus brief, then is there a reason why the faith community can't file an amicus brief?
yeah, that's a good point. I know that various groups have filed amicus briefs. I'm gonna go ahead and put those links in the chat. I also realize I took up too much time and Jessica still needs to talk about salmon. So I do want to be able to answer any questions folks have about Tacoma LNG, but also want to make sure Jessica can tell you about the salmon campaign we're working on. So I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat, and maybe at the end, if we have time, we can circle back.
I know it's something that we've done for our Children's Trust and Juliana versus, no, Aji versus State of Washington. So I'm wondering if it isn't possible to do something very similar. with
Yeah,
this
I
one.
think we had some legal help with that, as we're not lawyers. But that's an interesting idea, Deb, and something that we could look more into and see if we could get some support to get something rolling there. It's a good idea.
If we can get an attorney to help draft and
Yeah.
then go out. Okay, later. Go ahead with your spiel.
Any really pressing questions on Tacoma LNG before I'm just going to give a really brief bit on salmon. So if you have any questions on Tacoma LNG for Maddie before we move on. Okay. I will say each of these issues we teach hour-long workshops on that go in more depth and have some more time for interaction. So if that's something you're interested in for your congregation, you can be in touch and we can talk about scheduling out a time for a workshop that could be issue-based or could be more general about why we care for our environment as people of faith. Okay, so then briefly, this is another, like I said, a thing I could talk about for a good hour, but I want to bring up some breaking news around our work to stand with Nimipu for salmon recovery on the lower Snake River. So, gosh, yeah, it's hard to do a condensed version of this. The short of it is our salmon runs are in decline, and that has all sorts of implementation. Oh my gosh. It causes a lot of problems, right? First and foremost, the treaty resources that our salmon we're not upholding our obligations to help maintain our salmon populations, which are a cultural, spiritual, economic source of livelihood for Native peoples. It's an issue that crosses the Cascades in that it impacts our southern resident orca population, which depends on the salmon runs for their sustenance, as well as our fishing economy and everything connected to these icons of our region that are so wound up in who we are as Northwesterners. So for decades, there's been conversations about the lower Snake River and 4 dams in particular along the river that are not used to generate much electricity. There's a little bit that comes from them, but it's mostly in peak seasons when it's not as much needed, not like winter time. What they have done is create these slack water reservoirs that are really hard for the salmon to traverse. There's all sorts of issues with it in the temperature of the water. So warm waters are lethal to salmon. They're very particular to that. It extends the time that it takes. So instead of the rivers being really active and free flowing, the salmon have to work to swim along, and it increases the time, which also messes with their biological magic ability to change from freshwater to saltwater fish as they go to the ocean. Then, of course, we have the barriers that the dams create. So fish ladders do as much as they can, but it's still hard to get through these dams as there are physical barriers. So unfortunately, currently all 4 salmon and steelhead populations on the lower Snake are at risk of extinction. And this is something that the region is coming together to have some real conversations about. And that's where we come in as people of faith, in holding space for dialogue on something that can be a challenging conversation. So if you bring up this topic in the eastern part of our state, maybe some of you live over there, it can be really contentious from the get-go. So our role through Earth Ministry is to help ensure that we want win-win solutions that bring along all communities that are tied to the river. Of course, the tribe is first and foremost within that, as they are sovereign, and this is a treaty resource. But we also care about the farming community, our commercial and sport fisher people, and all who depend on the river. There's a lot of misinformation out there that we need to barge our grain down the river. We've seen over the years that is decreasing and decreasing, and what we can actually do is invest in upgraded rail infrastructure to move our products to market, which is happening more and more on its own, because as these dams age, they become more unreliable and expensive to repair and maintain. So all that to say, there's so much nuance in this issue that I'm not able to get to in this time. But we have exciting breaking news in that a US representative from Idaho has just in the last week or two released a proposal in Congress for a conversation around this issue of the future of the lower Snake River. It's a big deal for him to do such, as he is a Republican senator in a more conservative, representative in a more conservative state. So he's really going out on a bit of his own path here, breaking the party divide that is so pervasive in our country. So we very much are supportive of this proposal as a beginning point to the conversation. There's some pieces that we need to negotiate and continue to work with, but overall, it's amazing that this proposal was released. There's been a lot of press around it. We've had both a rabbi and a pastor from Walla Walla get some letters to the editor published about it that you can see on our website. And there's more you can read there. But what I want to direct you to for our last action today is to send a note to your US Congresspeople and our governor in support of Representative Simpson's proposal. So again, Earth Ministry has a form to make that easy for you to do. And Maddie, can you get that in the chat? Thank you. And I think I just saw something pop up. We'll also send around links and a follow-up note, because there's a lot here that we're giving you today. But what this letter does is it will be sent off to your representative and both of our senators, and it asks them to step into the conversation more fully as well. So it's not something where we're outright saying, yeah, breach the dams. That's one approach to this conversation. But as people of faith, we want to be really mindful, again, of all who depend on the river. And we want to keep communities whole. And we want to hold space for conversation around this that can move us all together. And ultimately, we do want to see a free flowing river, but we want to see that in a way that benefits the whole region. So that is the short version on our work on the Lower Snake River. It is ongoing. So again, if you stay in touch, you'll hear more about this campaign. Any questions? I'm seeing a lot in the chat, but I'm notoriously bad at following along. So
We are.
Problem with the representative's plan is that it doesn't begin until 2030. And that's far too late for the lower,
yeah,
or the southern resident ARCAs.
right.
Maybe too late for the river itself.
Right. And that's a piece that we can help with negotiations later on. So, the proposal isn't perfect. It's the beginning of the dialogue, and we will continue to show up and help ensure that our values are reflected in it as it moves through Congress and continues to be amended and whatnot. So that's something that very likely will come up as part of that conversation, but it's a good point, Gary.
We need to put pressure on our senators and governor.
Mm-hmm.
These are federal dams.
Yep.
Ill-conceived at the onset and supported just for primarily political reasons.
Yeah.
Versus any sensible
Right.
rationale. They're no longer useful.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in Kilmer's
Yes.
district, he's been very wishy-washy and will not make a strong statement at all, not even entirely in support of Simpson's plan. Even there, he's wishy-washy. And so it is worth putting pressure on Kilmer in particular, but also on any of the state reps to work with Simpson. And McMorris, Rogers, Newhouse, and Herrera Butler are very much against the plan.
Right.
So be aware of that when you talk to folks in Eastern Washington.
Yes. Yes. We are aware of that. And thank you, Maria. Representative Kilmer is one that we've been doing really direct engagement on. So we had a letter from people of faith to him from in-district constituents over the summer, signed by nearly 80 folks that we delivered. And because of that, actually our executive director has been meeting with his chief of staff for quite a while. We meet about monthly. So we have some continued pressure points to help encourage him to step forward and show stronger leadership. And so if you're in that district, and Maria, maybe if you're interested in doing more around that, let us know, and we're happy to find places to help plug you in.
He's heard from me quite a bit.
Good.
Basically though, if Kilmer says he supports the best science in the area, he has been given it several times over, and I was witness to 2 of the times he got the best science. So pressure is really needed on this.
I say keep it up. It's working. It may not look like it, but I think it is based on the conversations we've been able to open in Kilmer's office.
Yeah.
Lyndon also said that they're meeting with Patty Murray today online. That's great. We would love for you to bring this up with her. She's definitely someone that we're really looking to lead on this and hasn't quite shown that leadership yet. Sorry, go for it, Jessica. I know we're also running short on time.
I think we'll wrap with this. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to be in touch. Our emails are there in the chat, and we will follow up with these action items and resources for you all. And we're happy to be in, ongoing partnership and relationship too with your individual congregations. We're working more closely with Justice Washington, which is really bringing me a lot of joy. So this is not the last you will hear from us, and it is a joy to be in community with you all. And I'll turn it back over to Sahar or Larkin to close us out in our